Hey guys, and welcome back to MSFS Flight Plans. I'm Nick, and that is the Twin Otter. We are finally going to take it up in 2024. This was probably one of my top 3 favorite planes in 2020. Unfortunately, the devs just kind of abandoned it there at the end, and it gradually just kept deteriorating, and things were breaking and not working right. But this one is almost fully functional, and I say that because this is another one of the planes where the flight plan will not load directly from little nav map. But I think I may have accidentally just discovered a fix for that, and we're not going to know until we turn the avionics on, but we'll see in just a second. So we are north, way up north. This is probably the furthest north we've ever taken a flight, as I alluded to in that Switzerland flight. Yes, Switzerland. If you saw that, you know why I'm emphasizing that country's name. I've got a funny story behind all that I'll tell you about. I didn't have enough space to write it all in the comments, so I figured I'd tell you about it on this flight. But we're going to take it. We're way up north here. We got a beautiful scenery scape here. We got some more glaciers, way more glaciers than we saw in the Alps. And this is actually a handcrafted airport way up here. I didn't realize that, but then I was thinking, this looks really, really good. And the performance is great, too. So one thing with this plane is kind of interesting. You can click the door from the outside and it will open. Hey, Will, what are you doing in there already? But it doesn't get in. It just opens up. Oh, no, I didn't notice this before. They got some paint that's not disappearing. That's all right. I'm not complaining. I'm just going to be grateful that we can fly it. So in we go. Okay, I got a few things just kind of set up for us here, but I didn't turn anything on. I just thought I might forget about this. So we'll see if this is going to work here. So battery, ignition, and everything else is up overhead in this bad boy. I think one of the things that I like about this plane and the Chancellor, which is probably my #1 favorite plane, I'm just going to turn all the lights on for now. Pitot heat, so I don't have to keep coming back up here. I'll leave the taxi light off. And because we're so far up north, we'll go ahead and turn the heater on and crank it up. I just remember come back up here for the generator in a minute. The noises are great. The sounds are fantastic in this thing. All right, landing lights are already on. Start the right engine. We already got the props full forward. That's good. And let's get this Garmin going and see if this is going to work. Please, please, please work. That would just be so incredible. All right, we'll let that get cranked up while we look at the map here, get the engines going. Man, that's a tiny button. All right, right condition lever. What's up, man? Why are you all hunched over like that? Look like you're sitting on the pot or something. You got a stomach cramp? Or are you just excited? Excited, huh? Me too. He wants to see if that autopilot's going to work. All right, so that one's good. Let's get the left-hand side going. So I set this to 4,000 feet. You can fly obviously as high as you want, but I wouldn't go any lower than that because you're going to be scraping the belly on some mountains if you do. Left side fuel. Good to go. Go ahead and get 1 notch of flaps in. Landing lights are already on. So that's good. Let's just do the generators. Check and check. Okay, let's look at this map real quick so you can see what's up with this place. We are up here almost north of Greenland. We're north of Norway, and we're at this little archipelago here, which is actually the property of Norway now. I'll tell you about all the history of that. And it's not really as big as it appears on this map. You know, with these types of maps, when you flatten a globe out, it stretches everything out at the top and the bottom. So it's not nearly that big. This whole flight is about 65 miles, so maybe 30 minutes in the air. But I found this town because it's supposed to be the northernmost town in the world, which is obviously not the case, which tells you something about trusting the internet, because we're going to land in another town that's even further north than that. But this one is called Longyearbyen. And again, it looks fantastic. This map doesn't, but I will encourage you to use the map enhancement and the latest Bing map. Even the default map doesn't look that great. In fact, it looks pretty bad. Not as bad as this, but it's pretty bad. So the free map enhancement and the free Bing map is by far the best. The Google map is even worse than this one. It looks really, really bad. So we'll just take off here, hopefully keep our fingers crossed to be able to catch that autopilot, cruise around the town real quick. I'll tell you all about it. And my backup plan, if that doesn't work, is to do heading hold navigation, which is what I've done for all my test flights, which is what these extra little bookmarks are here. So the flight plan, as always, will be linked in the video description. And if you bring the bookmarks in and you feel like you need to use a heading hold for some reason, which hopefully you'll never have to do again, unless you just like doing it, this number here is the same as that number. It's just, I can barely see it now, and once I move it over to my other smaller screen to the left, I can't see it at all. It's just too small. So that's what these are. They're just a slightly bigger version of the next upcoming heading. So you can look at that if it's helpful for you. If not, just ignore it. But these glaciers are going to look really nice. They're going to look that good in the sim. Not that good, this good. Look at the water. Even the watercolor changes and everything just like that. I don't know what's going on up here. So our furthest north flight before this, let's see, we took some flights down here, and then we took one over in Greenland, which was probably right around here, so we were nowhere near this far north. And man, trying to get good satellite imagery up here, you never find it, which is another reason why we're coming up here. So once we get up here, we're going to come into this town, which does have a dirt runway. It's about 3,000 feet, and there's a freeware add-on for this I also have installed. I didn't look at it before the add-on, and I think it's a 2020, so it probably just cleans the runway up a little bit. And this is a remarkably hilly runway, as you'll see when we're coming in. And it also throws some ships out here in the water, which is kind of neat. So I don't know if it's working or not, but it's free, so I threw it in there. And that's that. The time of year, I would strongly encourage you to set, if you want to see anything, because it's very, very dark this time of the year. In February, I set to June, and to get the shadows looking just right, I set it to 1400 UTC time. So that'll make all the few perma shadows that we'll see look a lot more natural and won't really stick out and jump out at you. All right, parking brake's already off. Will, you ready to go? Let's see if this thing is going to work. All right, let me get my vertical speed ready so we can go ahead and hit that. Did we get the transponder going? I can't remember, so we'll just... Yep, we did. Good. That's set. Whoop. Not that I can see that, but I know where the position is for that. Fuel pumps are on. Okay, we're ready to go. Let's do it. And I'm kind of wondering if in this plane, it's really that hard to see all the gauges. I mean, all you can really see is your artificial horizon. You can see half of the altimeter, half of the airspeed indicator, and you can't see the VSI at all. It's back there behind the yoke. So I don't know if you just have to get all hunched up over it, like Will is very aptly demonstrating for us, or if it's really that hard to see those things. All right, rotate. Oh, there we go. There we go. All right, positive rate of climb. Flaps up. Pull the power back a little bit. Come on, Autopilot. Engaged. Nav mode. Oh, I think we got it. I think we got it. All right, vertical speed. We'll control that externally. Let's do 900 feet a minute, just to clear these mountains. So here we are circling over Longyearbyen, which if you look around on the internet, as I mentioned before, and that's how I found this place, I was looking for the northernmost town in the world. This will pull up for all of those searches, but there's a lot of fine print associated with that title, I now understand. One site said it was the northernmost town with year-round permanent residents in the world, but that's not correct because the town we're flying up to has people all year round. Not very many, but they're up there. So let's turn these lights off. Then I found another designation which says it's the northernmost with more than 1,000 permanent residents, and I don't even know if that's accurate, but since I didn't feel like mining that rabbit hole any further. What I can say with certainty is that this is a decent-sized town that is situated very far to the north. We're only 800 miles from the North Pole here, so we are way up there for sure. And as you look down at the structures, they don't look too bad. You can see a few, obviously they're default. You can see some flat stuff in between, but it's not too bad. Again, I'm taking what I can get this far up north, and look at the landscape. The texturing is amazing. Looks good. That orangish, brownish looking building there is a university, and it really does look like that. The footprint's right anyway. The roof's probably not quite right. But it's amazing they have a university out here because as of 2023, the total population was around 2,500 residents, all of whom apparently own at least one snowmobile, and I say that because there are a lot more snowmobiles registered out here than there are people. And look how this water changes color. I love that about 2024. That's what it really looks like on the satellite map, and that's what's rendered here in the sim. So right around here you can see a little bit of a map seam there. We'll get a couple as we're coming into, but for the most part, it's not too bad. That spot to the right there, you can see it's a little bit fuzzy, and then it's going to clear up, and from here on out it's going to look pretty good until we approach our destination. Along with learning the skill of riding a snowmobile, you also have to know how to use a rifle. And in the video that I've attached to the description, there's two of them, one for the place that we left from and the one that we're coming into, which I would definitely check out. They're very short and very well made. But the narrators for both of them said that anyone leaving town is required to be armed with a rifle that they know how to use, because they also have a pretty significant polar bear population out here. But this town got its start as a failed tourism destination, if you can believe that, in 1896, which lasted for all of 1 year, but a couple of families decided to hang around for some reason, and it's a good thing they did because someone found coal sticking out of the ground just 2 years later. And after that, things got really serious. The name they first gave the town was Longyear City, named after John Longyear, an American timber tycoon who came out here as a tourist in 1901. And while he was out here, he met some coal prospectors and saw enough potential to buy up some huge land claims from Norway. And it sounds like he did quite well up until World War I, after which he ran into some financial issues, sold his shares of the company. Right up here, I'm just going to circle this thing. This is one of the two POIs out here. That is the entrance to a global seed vault, which they opened in the early 2000s, and in there they're storing like 20 million different species of plant seeds in case something so apocalyptic happens that they need backups. Look at this runway. That looks so good and so real. The shoreline looks great. We're getting a little bit of popping there. But coal remained big business out here all the way up until fairly recently. I read they completely banned mining in 2021. And then the other POI is up there on the top of that hill over there. That's called the Svalbard Satellite Station, comprised of 100 antennas, which make it the largest in the world as far as how many satellites it can communicate with. And the main reason they put something this far north is that the only way to maintain contact with low Earth orbiting satellites that cross the poles is to have antennas way up here. There's another one down in Antarctica, but it's not as big as that one. Alright, from here to... Look at this coastline. Oh, gosh, it looks perfect. You just don't see this kind of stuff at these latitudes. What a treat. What a treat. So not much else to talk about from here about as far as things on the ground go, other than some amazing landscape features. But I do have all kinds of cool things to tell you about. But before we get to that, I'll share a little slice of life story with you guys. If you saw our most recent flight showcasing Clifford's new add-on for the falls over Switzerland, you may have noticed that I called the country Sweden multiple times, as a matter of fact. And as embarrassing as that is, there's a bit of a story behind that. I tried to give a little buffer excuse until I had the time to tell you about it. I didn't want to type it all out in the comment section. But it probably goes without saying that I know where Sweden is. We were just out there touring a huge portion of it 3 flights ago. But as a bit of an added excuse, I was up here in the Nordics working on this flight for a few days before I broke it off to do the trip for Clifford stuff, so I have been reading about and seeing Sweden a lot lately. But that's not the main excuse. It's even better than that. If you have watched any portion of our now 200 flights, this is our 201st flight since we started this channel 2 Mays ago, you probably won't be surprised to hear that I'm a bit of a geography geek. I know that's a weird thing to be into, but I'm not into sports, so there has to be something. But I've been fascinated by it my entire life. In fact, I nearly won the geography bee for the state of Connecticut when I was in 6th grade. And I didn't even know I knew that much about geography until, the whole class, they just weeded everybody out by doing the whole class first. I won it for my class, and then they pitted me against all the other students in the school. I won that. And then I won it for my region, and then went up to Hartford with my parents and my teacher to compete in the finals. But while I was there, I got knocked out for accidentally answering Sweden when I meant to say Switzerland. The question was something along the lines of, along with Austria, this European country contains the largest percentage of Alps within its border, and I was like, yes, I know that, easy, Sweden. Got up and said Sweden, even though in my mind I was picturing the country, I knew where Sweden was, I was thinking Switzerland, no, I wasn't thinking Switzerland, I was thinking Sweden, but I was thinking about the right geographic area, and you would think that after experiencing that kind of trauma, I would never do it again. But for some reason, I just keep doing it, and I didn't even realize I did it until one of our members pointed it out. I even typed Switzerland in the video description. And what's weird is I can't think of any other 2 places in the world that I have misnamed as much as Sweden and Switzerland, but I do it all the time. And it only goes one way. I never call Sweden Switzerland. It always happens just the way it did on that flight. Several times. And considering the nature of our channel and any other circumstances, I would just pull the video and redo the whole thing because I'm a bit of a perfectionist in that regard. But since there's such a strange story behind all that, I figured I'd leave it up so you can see my brain short-circuiting in real time. Maybe it'll be like one of those error baseball cards. I was into baseball cards for a while, although not into baseball. Once it's out there, it's out there. And then becomes really valuable. So maybe some more people will check out that video just because I told you that story. Wouldn't that be a win? One of my favorite error baseball cards on that subject, I actually opened up a baseball card store when I was 16 years old. If you've never seen it, look for the Billy Ripken FF error card. It's a 1989 Fleer baseball card. And I won't tell you what the error is because it is definitely PG-13, but you should check that out if you don't know what I'm talking about. But I did apologize to Cliff, however, since we were reviewing his flight, who was totally cool with it. Very gracious. So just a heads up, next time we're in Switzerland, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to call it Sweden, even after all this. A little bit of a mental block I've got. Okay, so getting back to what we've got out here in Denmark. Just kidding. This archipelago is called Svalbard, and is in fact under the governance of Norway today. But the first person to lay eyes on it that we're aware of anyway was a Dutch fellow named Willem Barents, who sailed past it in 1596. And shortly after that, the English started coming up here each year to hunt walrus, followed by bowhead whales starting around 1611. And apparently there was some ongoing turf wars between the English, Danish, Dutch, and French, and later the Russians, who weren't nearly as combative about everything. But all those guys were claiming rights to be the sole hunters around the islands up here. The problem was there were no rights to be claimed because no country officially owned the area until Norway nabbed it in the Svalbard Treaty of 1920. And by that time, the Russians were out here doing some coal mining. So they all had to reach an agreement about who would do what. And they call it a free economic zone and can't be militarized, although it was a little bit. Although the Norwegian mainland was occupied by Germany during World War II, these islands were used by the Allies as a logistics center until it looked like the Nazi invasion was inevitable. So the Allies decided to destroy all the mining facilities, burn all the piles of coal, and evacuate everyone in something they named Operation Gauntlet in 1941. This area looks pretty good out here. This is actually on the right side of a map seam that has a little bit lower resolution, but from up here it looks great. And once we come around the top of this land up here, we're going to see some really nice looking rocks. And those are not photographic trees down here. There are almost no trees on this island anywhere. Only 10% of it has any kind of vegetation at all, though 60% of it is covered with glaciers. So it must just be moss or something growing down there. But once the Germans got up here, they realized there wasn't much of a prize with all the coal burning and none of the machinery working. So they just set up a little weather station and a runway and called it a day. But I read they did sink a German ship as it was either coming or going. So I guess that's kind of a win. As far as climate goes up here, well, it's cold, very cold. And for half the year, it's cold and dark. We're about 700 miles north of the Arctic Circle, so you'd be wise to bring a flashlight if you're visiting from October to March, during which time the sun does not get above the horizon. I don't know if you caught it or not, but there was a little bit of popping in off in the distance as we were approaching the land over here. And I'm pretty pleased that it's only doing that because 3 flights ago, I couldn't get the snow to disappear no matter what time of year I set it on. It wasn't that noticeable because it was pretty far off in the distance, but these glaciers up here are going to look really, really nice. Alright, check out these rocks right here along the coastline. They're about to come into view. There's something about just the desolation of places like this that's just kind of eerie and haunting and fascinating to me. Look at those rocks there. You see that mountain just coming into view there under a pillar? You wouldn't know it unless I told you, but just to illustrate the importance of getting the time of day right, that is a perma-shadow on this side of it, so if you move the sun around, it would stay that dark. But if you set the time of day to 1400 UTC in the month of July, I think today is 28th or so, 24th maybe? Yeah, the 24th. You won't even notice it. And the glaciers will look a lot more natural too. The average temperature does get above freezing, barely, during the summer months, with a daily average high of about 48 degrees Fahrenheit in July. And in March, it will sometimes get as toasty as 10 degrees. These glaciers come right down to the water. That's another thing about 2020. They looked a lot like that one right in front of us, where there would just be a ledge, and then it looked like it's just kind of running and drooping over the sides. Look at that. They come right down to the water there. Oh, geez, I almost forgot to mention how I got the autopilot to work. You guys wouldn't want to hear about that, would you? Look at that glacier there, right there on that edge. That's what you want to see. And most of them in 2024 do look like that. So this was another one of those planes where when you bring it in, some of them when it's not working, so if it is working, you make it in little nav map, then you bring the .plin file into the sim, you follow the instructions in that tutorial video I put up here, and if it's a plane where the avionics work, it'll bring it in just like you set it up in little nav map. Unfortunately, they are few and far between. So if it's not working, some of the planes will bring it in and then it'll just draw a line straight from your departure airport to your arrival airport. And some of them, like this one was doing, won't put anything in there at all. It'll just show your plane down there on the map and there'll be nothing in it. So I did that a few times, and then I was trying to do something else in the EFB beforehand, and I just did the departure and arrival, so I knew I had a point A to point B, but I adjusted it just a little bit and then forgot to upload it to the EFB, and they got in here and noticed that the line was showing up. So in other words, I had the point A to point B set up in the EFB, then went and adjusted the map a little bit, just to bring it down to a parking space, actually. And then I noticed that the line was drawn in there, which it wasn't doing before. So then I thought, well, wait a minute. What's the difference here? What's the variable? It was me going in there and adjusting something. So then I just pulled up my little nav map on my left-hand screen and manually drew in the flight plan on the world map. And then I loaded it up, which was still kind of a pain in the butt, because if you click on anything or change anything, it deletes and starts it over. Look at that thing running down there in that little valley. Looks good, and we're still on the fuzzy side of the line. Once we cross over this mountain range, we'll be in the much more high-fidelity stuff. So that must be the secret, which will work great for flights like this. I don't know how well it will work for... I mean, we're talking like 70% of the planes, the autopilot's not working. I think I had the landing lights on the whole time. That's all right. Doesn't matter, there's nobody out here. So if we can do that, that opens up a lot of planes, because some of them I really want to fly, but it is just too much of a pain in the butt to try to keep them level or do heading holds and all that kind of stuff, and track the notes and all that. Those bluish shadows down there are some more perma shadows, but again, they're in the right spot, so it doesn't really stick out too much other than them being blue. So this is great. This is really, really good news. And for helicopter flight plans, which is when we're really doing the detailed stuff, the precision flying, it doesn't matter because we can't fly on autopilot anyway. So I'm very, very excited about this, and I'm sure it's probably only a matter of... What's so funny is that it's obviously works for some of the planes, like the 172 and the Caravan, works just fine, loads up, everything's just fine. And some of those have the same avionics as we've got here, so I don't know why it might be plane specific. I can't figure out what's going on with all that, and I certainly wish it wasn't doing it. Okay, now we're crossing into the much better graphical area here, and you can tell this looks really nice. Really, really nice. This whole little strip for the next several miles is going to look really good. Look at the color differences, how it changes there. Just vast nothingness as far as the eye can see. So anyway, we'll be flying a lot more planes now that we can do that, which is great news. And I've already got several of them on my mind, starting with that Dornier double-ender thing. You guys want to see how things are looking from the back? I know I do. Oh my gosh. Oh, look at that. That is unbelievable. Amazing. Wow, look how detailed that is. And you know it has relief too, because when I had some snow on it before I removed it all, you could see the little lumps and bumps in the layer of snow on top of it too. Just superb. Really love it. What a great view this is. This is always my favorite seat on the plane when I'm riding one in real life, because I like to watch the flaps go up and down. Who doesn't like that? I wonder what this little thing is right here. Maybe for dumping fuel? If one of you guys know, let me know. That's interesting. Alright, back up front. So as I mentioned before, not that I needed to, not a lot of vegetation out here. Practically none. So all you geology buffs, knowing that this place is just one giant hunk of coal, might be wondering how the heck so much coal got out here with virtually no organic material anywhere. Well, a little over 300 million years ago, these islands were down near the equator and covered with vegetation. Among other things, they found fossils of a type of fern that used to grow down here, or up here now, that was almost 100 feet high, over 30 meters high, they said, which would be pretty impressive to see in real life, assuming you could get past the foot-long cockroaches. And this incredible landscape hasn't always looked this way either. I think it was initially formed by some plate collisions, somewhere very far from here, I imagine. But before the current ice age, which is called the Quaternary, which began about 2.6 million years ago, this was all a big plateau. But a couple million years of glaciers can obviously do some serious work on the landscape, which I'm very grateful for because this looks incredible. And yes, we are still in an ice age. If you saw my, not the last Clifford pack tour, but the one before that, when we were just a little bit further south of this, down in Norway, I mentioned that we are still in an ice age. There have been several periods where there was no ice whatsoever on the Earth. So I guess as long as there's still some, which we certainly have now, we're still in an ice age. And I'm fine with that, because it seems like all the bugs get really huge when there's not an ice age. And I'm not a big bug fan, which does not bode well living down in Florida. You haven't seen a cockroach till you come down to Florida. I can't get over how detailed this is. Just look at that. I wish I could get my thumbnail with that behind me, but the sun would be on the wrong side of the plane. But anyway, on the subject of climate change, about which I will not invite any political commentary, if you please, I read a really good book a few years ago called The Ends of the World by a guy named Peter Brennan, and I actually got all the way through it, which is a testament to how well it was written, because I have a very short attention span. But he was talking about the relationship of CO2 levels in the atmosphere with massive, sometimes global, periods of volcanic hyperactivity that were associated with each of history's mass extinction events, which I think there was 4 or 5 of them. And he was saying in the last couple chapters that the pace of CO2 saturation since the Industrial Revolution has been significantly faster than any of those mass extinction periods. In other words, the levels got much higher eventually, but not nearly as fast as they've been for the last 200 years, which I found to be a bit of an eye-opener. Okay, this is one of my favorite turns here from the right side view. You ready for this? Brace yourself. You ready, Will? Look at the bottom of this mountain ridge over to the right. The rocks gathering up by the side of the glacier over there. That is just incredible. And it's so odd how the texture of each glacier seems to be a little bit different parts of it. Some seem to be a little bit smoothed off. There's going to be one when we're coming in for landing that is so jagged. But this one looks pretty smooth. That is fantastic. You know, if I was to gripe about one thing, and I gripe about a lot of things, see how the little layer of snow starts right there? I thought that might have been the Baijian Seasons pack doing that as you change the seasons, but it's in the sim. Because I pulled out Baijian to see if it was still doing it, and it was. So as you change the months, there's that really delineated area where the snow stops on the side of the mountains. But see, like right there below us, if they could somehow get it to transition instead of a line, a little bit more blotchy like that, it would look so much more believable than having that line across everything. And being that it's June right now, I think that's probably about as high as we could get the snow to go. I'd love to have it disappear entirely, so we're just seeing the natural satellite image. Aside from the interesting fact that this might be the most northern human populations in the world, another reason I wanted to fly up here, as I mentioned before, is because the satellite imagery is so unusually good up here. We'll see a few more rough spots when we're coming in, but it is extremely rare to see something this clear way up here. Now that's interesting. Look at those little dots over there on the landscape. Maybe they're polar bears. I wonder what that is. I don't have any of the fauna turned on. Surely they can't be any kind of little structures or anything. Maybe little research tents or something. They're definitely not windmills, unless they're very small. That last Greenland flight we took was pretty impressive, but that was about 700 miles further south. And I started thinking about that, and got to wondering why there's so little decent imagery at the farthest northern and southern latitudes. So I did a little research about satellite orbits to see if I could find the answer, and I did. And just in case you ever wondered the same thing, I'll tell you what I uncovered. There are several types of orbits into which they put the satellites, but I'll limit this to the three most common. I found about 6 different main types. The first is geostationary, and as the name implies, if you could see one of these from the ground, which you certainly could not, it would look like it never moves, because it orbits at exactly the same speed as the Earth's rotation. And they don't use those for imagery because they have to be precisely 22,236 miles above the Earth, which is a long distance for decent high-resolution images. So instead they use them mostly for telecommunications and weather tracking. Well, there's another one of those little things. I really can't tell what that is from here. Maybe it's an igloo. I'm just going to call it a polar bear, because that would be awesome. To get the best pictures, they use what are called LEO, or Low Earth Orbit satellites, which can get as low as 110 miles from the surface, which is about the same range as the space station. I think that one's around 250 miles up or so. But the LEOs usually fly a pattern that crosses back and forth over the equator to get as much coverage of populated areas as possible. But most of them don't come far enough north or south to get decent pictures up here, mainly because there isn't much to see. But there are a few satellites that do cross directly over the poles, and those are called, wait for it, polar orbiting satellites. And since these do circle the poles, they could see every inch of the planet if anyone wanted to do it, and some fly low enough to get some great shots. The problem is not many people want to pay that much for something like that because there's so little demand for images way up here to the north and south. So not many satellites are launched for that purpose. So the moral of that story is we should all be very grateful when we see areas like this because for some reason someone thought it was valuable enough to pay for pictures of it. Just real quick, since I'm going to be concentrating on landing and can't look at my notes, we're about to come on to our approach here. I'm going to tell you about the town at our destination. It's called Ny-Ålesund, although it doesn't look like you'd pronounce it that way. And these guys do claim to be the northernmost continuously populated town of any size, but it's only barely populated. In the summer they have around 120 people up here, but that drops down to under 50 in the winter. And I'm surprised there's even that many. That'd probably be pretty miserable. There's that line on the mountains again. And it looks a little fuzzy here too. I think there's some haze on the satellite image in this section. But it's mostly used for research operations today, also getting its start as a coal town. Interestingly, some whalers were the first to find coal in 1610, but nobody came up here to start mining until the early 1900s. It sounds like, however, those endeavors were not all that profitable. They did give it a solid effort until there was a big mine explosion that killed 21 miners in 1962, which led to the end of all mining a year later. But 3 years after that, in 1966, the nerd herd invaded, and pretty much everything up here has been all about scientific research ever since. And based on what I could find online, it sounds like they're mostly doing atmospheric and oceanic studies, and glaciology, of course. And again, I do have an add-on for this airport. I'll link that in the video description. Okay, as soon as we take this left-hand turn up here, I'm going to go ahead and set our target altitude for 1,500 feet. And then once we hit this left-hand turn, I'm going to start descending at 500 feet a minute, and then we'll pull the throttle back a little bit. And we're getting pretty close, so now we'll turn our landing lights back on. Look how good these look. There's that line again, going right down the middle of the glacier. How strange is that? And it seems like most of them have that. Not all of them, but most of them. Look at this over here. Wow. That is impressive. Really nice. And there's that line again. See, this is what I'm talking about. Looks very unnatural. Just give it a little bit of blotchiness and nobody would notice anything. Okay, so here comes the turn. Change our vertical speed. We'll come down at 500 feet a minute. That should get us right where I want to be, right at the right spot. And pull the power back a little bit because we'll probably overspeed. Look at the color changes in the rocks and everything, the dirt. And just so detailed. I have been looking forever for a good spot to fly in Antarctica, and there's a couple of decent patches. A lot of it looks a lot like this. Most of it has even more snow than this, and I'm kind of curious if the northernmost parts of Antarctica are farther from the South Pole than we are here. Look at that down there. But if I could find a good stretch, there's so much cool stuff to talk about Antarctica. Not much to see. But I'm having a really hard time finding an area that's just not really jacked up. Again, it's a latitude issue. And there's one more map scene. Yep, you can tell it gets a little bit less resolution once we cross it. Well, those cliffs don't look too bad. But the ground below it there, you can tell that's soft. That just must be AI cliffs there. How's our speed looking? Good. So far, so good. That kind of looks like a little volcano up there, and I looked on the satellite map. I don't think that it is. It's much more open on the other side, even though it looks like the top of a cone from up here. And our airport, our strip, is going to be this little gray thing right there. And it'll be pretty obvious once we get closer to it. But look at this watercolor. It goes from muddy to more clear. Never saw anything like that in 2020. It was all just one unicolored water. And I love this. This is great. Let's take one more look out that back window. Just okay. I meant to get back here before. This was that really jagged glacier, the one we just flew over, compared to all the others. I wonder what it'd be like to try to walk across something like that. If you could even do it, you'd probably need to do that deal where they strap the ladders together and stretch it across the tops of them. So there must be another seam up here because those islands look really detailed, far more than that mainland part of it back there does. Look at the heat blur under the wing there. Fantastic. Just love it. Okay, I'm going to start slowing down even a little bit more here, or we're going to wind up overshooting the runway. We got about 1,000 more feet to go. Check the barrel one more time. And I'll go ahead and get slow enough to get one notch of flaps out. That'll give us a little bit more aerodynamic braking. Even for some fuzzy landscape, that glacier looks pretty detailed. Not quite like the others, but not too bad. And for some reason, there are all kinds of trees out around this airport, like everywhere. Not sure why that is, but that's not the case in real life. I'm wondering if the Bijan pack being in now will fix that up, because last time I was out here was when I didn't have it in, and there were trees everywhere, big trees. Alright, we're within 1,000 feet. Let's slow down a little bit more. I'm not sure what flap 1 speed is for this, but we'll get them out at 120, just to let it self-trim. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and take the autopilot off now too. And come on over here. Slow her down a bit more. Full props. Yep, you can see that runway over there. It's that light colored spot. Boy, this looks really great out here. I may have taken too much power out. Throw in a notch of flaps. Trim the nose down a bit. Oh, by the way, guys, I have got some great news, for me anyway. I've really been wanting to get a 5090. I've got this old 3090 that was originally part of a Bitcoin mining rig that I had, and it's just kind of rattling and clanking, and I'd like to milk as much performance as I can possibly get out of my computer. But as you know, they're kind of hard to find, those 5090s, so I bought an entire computer, and I'll tell you about it, including how much I paid, because I know a lot of you guys would probably be curious about that. They say it's going to take about 2 months to get here because of the delay in getting the cards. But I looked all around on the internet, and I'm not a computer guy, so I've just kind of based it on all the things that I've seen you guys talking about as far as dream builds go. The place I got it from is called Digital Storm, and the total that I paid for it was $4,900 out the door, which I thought was pretty good considering it will probably be impossible to buy even a Founders Edition 5090 at the retail price of $1,900 or $2,000. But that is the GPU that I've got, the processor. I got my notes pulled up here with the specs. It's an AMD Ryzen 7 9800X 3D. Motherboard is an MSI Pro X670E Gaming Plus. And it's got 64 gigabytes of memory, which I might upgrade to 128. And once I get it, because I have some extra cards laying around. 500. And then it's got a water cooler, just on the CPU though, not the GPU. It was like another $800 to get the GPU cooled, but I figured I'd get the water cooler for the CPU. So I'm stoked, and I'll be sure to tell you guys once I get it loaded up, give you all my performance feedback. I'm hoping not to be disappointed. I've seen nothing but pretty much negative press about that since it came out, but we're used to that. We've survived the launch of MSFS 2024. 100. Look how bumpy this runway is. You can really tell once you get right down on it. 30, but I think it looks pretty realistic too. The add-on did a good job out here. Come on, Otter, bring us on down. Wrap it up for us. There we go. I'll throw it in beta. Get those flaps up. Look at this. Climbing up this hill here. Helps you slow down, that's for sure. Alright, cut the fuel. Pull the props back. And we'll just leave the battery on so it doesn't make anything wonky happen with the sim. Just a couple things I want to show you real quick with a little bit more detail. You see this mountain here? This is what the other side of it looks like, which kind of looks like the side might have gotten blown off, doesn't it? But I don't think they've had any recent volcanic activity out here. And by recent, I mean in the past 100,000 years or so. But maybe they just had a landslide of some kind. All right, let's take the centering off and head back to where we departed from. Not much to see between here and there. Let's see if we can see any of those tiny little dots. Nope, yep, this is way too washed out. Can't see anything at all. Over here, maybe? So there is a little tiny research place up here. I think it's called this is called Mount Zeppelin, I believe. And this is the Zeppelin Research Center up here. And this thing here is a little gondola. That's how you get up to the top of it, which is cool. And I don't think that was modeled in the sim either. We may just be too far away from civilization for any of the add-ons to reach it. Right down here, I was hoping we could see them, but we can't. They have two tram lines, not for humans, but for coal, that would run right along here. So when you're taking off, if you see this road to the right, they'd be on the right side of this. They're still there in real life. And you'll be able to see them in that video that I posted. They're not running, but they built them around 1900. And then they've got some... You can't see these at all in the sim. If you go down here, the map is a lot clearer even than this in the sim. You can see the tiny little shadows of the towers from... So they would run from here, bringing coal down here to the port, and then over here, maybe even some over here, I don't know. But there were two that I was able to spot pretty easily on the Bing map. Yo, you can barely see them. Really, really faint line. See it running right there? They ran all the way down there, and now they're just dangling there, which is pretty cool. So here's where the opening to the seed vault is. There's the door right there. It's like a little triangle sticking out of the top of it. And then here is the satellite station, which looked way better in the sim because there wasn't any snow there. But that's a cool little POI. I'm glad they put that in there. Very neat. So that's it, guys. I hope to take the flight. Good luck with the autopilot if you can get that to work. So again, all I did, I had this over on my other screen here and then just kind of tried to ballpark it, which again works fine when you're not looking at really detailed stuff on the ground. Probably wouldn't work great if we were trying to fly a very specific distance away from things. It would probably be too hard for me to map it over. But this does open the door to pretty much all the planes that I didn't feel like flying without any kind of GPS navigation. Now we've got it. And I'm going to redraw this flight plan to make it just like we did. I kind of altered it a little bit after my last test flight, so I'll make it line up just like we did, but if you wanted to fly anywhere around here, it all looks good. Once you come a little bit further over here, I noticed when I was zooming way in on the world map, there was some bad satellite areas over here, which is kind of weird because these look fantastic. So I'd kind of stay within this corridor we were flying because it gets a little crazy over here, it gets a little crazy over there, and really even over here. So this is just a great route between these two places. Very, very cool. Learned a lot of stuff. We got to check out the furthest north towns probably in the world. Had an absolute blast. Can't wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.